Welcome to another incubation show and tell. Today we are talking to Roy Nieterau from Colorbleed. And he's going to show and tell about Colorbleed and animation.
So I'll be talking about game trailers and tell a bit about myself. But what we do is we design game trailers for game studios to sell their game. And I'll tell you a bit about how we do that and like what from the game we use and stuff like that. But I think the presentation will cover all of it. So who am I? So I'm Roy Nieterau. I graduated a long time ago in 2011 at the Utrecht School of Arts. We graduated with a film called Mac and Cheese. It's on the left side. So what do I do? These days, I'm a director. So I direct animations and films and storytelling, specializing in story-driven and character animation. So like if it's a Heineken bottle, I've done it in the past, but it's not necessarily about just a bottle being there. But most of the stuff that I do revolves around characters. Aside of that, I'm kind of the geek in the office, so I do pipeline and tool development. I know a lot of stuff about developing for game as well. I'm not a game designer myself, but I did do a multiplayer game in Unity once, only local because it was too slow over the internet. So I'm the technical director, and I supervise both animation and anything technical. And in 2012, I think we started Colorbleed, the animation studio. We're here in Utrecht, and we do character animation, and it was founded after the success of our film. So we started off in the industry in advertising commercials, so we've done a lot of TV commercials. But since 2015 or 2016, we kind of grew into the ambition on doing game trailers. I kind of started the Utrecht School of Arts because I really loved the Blizzard cinematics at the time. That's what I grew up with. So it was a heck of a fun that in 2016 we were able to do a game trailer for the first time. And since then, game partners have been coming to us for pitches and new projects, which I'll be showing you. So I'm going to show you a brief clip. It's very badly edited. It has no music whatsoever, so it's pretty raw, but it shows some of the work, just a glimpse of what we do.
Won't spare you, young chap. Hey, man. Every and
So I learned that you just shouldn't do show reels longer than like a minute or so. So this is about 30 seconds. It's very short. But I can show you at the end. If I don't talk too much, I can show you more. But this is basically what we do, animation, 3D animation. So it's not really 2D what we're doing. So what will I be telling you about? I will tell you about how to get started making a trailer and how we do that for our clients. So how do we approach game trailers for our partners? And tell you a bit about how we use the game art, the art that you've made, like it's your game, how we use that to really develop the film around it. Of course, it's about generating buzz with your trailer. You want to generate a hype so people see it and it kind of like lives up to expectation and stuff like that. Scheduling a release. I think PR, if you're a game developer, is often pretty late on the list. It's not your first priority, but if you want to sell your game, at some point you need to think about it. And my recommendation is kind of hidden throughout the presentation, but better start sooner than later. And let's be transparent. I'll take you through an example and just show you numbers that are related to it. It's not the exact same quote, but it shows an idea of like how much does it cost. And I'll tell you a bit about pushing your trailer to the right channels and media and scheduling that too. So the first tip would be, don't stare yourself blind and hold it off. Just get started. Even if you're early in development of your game, start thinking about the idea of potentially releasing it. If you don't, you probably won't end up releasing it, but you'll definitely forget about the trailer. So the sooner you think about it, the better. And what would be our first questions? Let me see. As an animation studio, that we would ask you to figure out what kind of movie we would make. And of course, it's your game, so you probably know best. So we would ask, like, what is the most striking thing about your game? Is it the style, or is it the story? Is it the gameplay? Does it have like a unique selling point in a way? I would hate to start saying, what's your USP? Because it's very commercial and advertising. But basically, it comes down to that. Like, what are you selling, and why is someone who wants to play a game, is it going to be fun for them? What do you want to show and tell? Is it early in development of your game? Is it about announcing it? Is it about releasing it now? You want people to buy it now? Make sure it's clear from the trailer, or at least the way you use it. Other questions we would ask is, do you have ideas of what you want to show in the trailer? Do you have like a story laid out? Do you want us to make, do you have a script? Do you have a storyboard? Again, even though we're animators and we can come up with crazy stuff, like we make, aside of game cinematics, we make animations in general. So we come up with stories and develop them. But this is about the game, and this is probably your game, so you know best. So I would be asking about what's your budget and the release deadline, and how you plan to do that. But I'll cover the budget things later again. So how do we use your game assets? Everything is inspired on just your assets. Even if you make a low poly game or 2D, we would ask you about your concept art. Even though it's not what you would be selling in the end, we want to figure out what is your game about and why is it like so visually striking, or is it so interesting to look at? When possible, we would love to play the game. I'm kind of a gamer. I must admit that if I play a game, I usually spend 2 hours playing it, figuring out how it works, and then I kind of know the gist of it, and I stop playing. Maybe once or twice I open the game up again. So I'm not really a hardcore gamer getting all the achievements. Any reference assets that you have laying around, like if you have a 3D game, of course you would be asking, like, do you have a 3D model? If you make a high-resolution game and it's for PlayStation 4, for example, you'd probably have ZBrush sculpts, very high-detailed characters, which are not in the game. But we would ask, like, if we have that, it's going to be more efficient for us to develop the same quality and really match it to the game. But in most cases, a game usually has low-poly characters, so we would make them high-res. We would set up stuff like fur simulations and grooming the character. Sometimes we make an additional character. For example, we did a trailer for Redeemer where there's fur on a rat, but the rat wasn't even in the game. We just thought it would be cool for the trailer, and they liked it, so we added that. And we would generate the rigs specifically for a cinematic and not for in-game. And we would match whatever we render pre-rendered, not real-time, matches the style of your game. So that's going to be some look developments. So basically, we'd be converting whatever you have. And then I want to talk a bit about generating buzz with your game. I would say go crazy. Like I said, figure out what's important for your game and just put it out there. Don't oversell your game, especially not written out on Twitter like No Man's Sky or anything, because it might bite you in the back. But generally, making a trailer is about selling and overhyping your game. I just had a talk recently with someone who told me that nowadays there's much less game demos being made because they found out it didn't really work well in selling your game, because people would just play and say, it's not really done yet, it's like halfway there, you meet bugs. So what do? Instead of that, they just overhype with a game trailer, because that looked amazing. And if you play the game, it's actually done, and you probably have the same amount of bugs, but nowadays. But anyway, it's about generating the hype, and that's probably why a game trailer works so well. So generating buzz, don't be afraid to stand out, go crazy. But the second thing is, nowadays on social media, like you scroll directly past something in the first 5 seconds or so. So I would say, almost at the beginning, let me see if I have my cursor here, focus on getting their attention. Show your gun in the drawer. Show something that creates suspense. And it doesn't have to be the boat horn sound from Inception. Like, it doesn't even have to be that. You don't have to show skulls being shattered to the ground, even though we've done that in some of the trailers. But it can also be just the hook of your story. I kind of got hooked to, I think it was The Last of Us, at the beginning intro cinematic, where you just get hooked on the story in the first, half minute or maybe even less. That works too. It doesn't have to be epic, crazy action. So if you have a very good story that you can explain the hook of it, the adventure, in the first 5 or 10 seconds, do so. And in the exact same way, you notice that huge game developers, they show their logo because you probably get hooked. It's like, what are they doing now? You just want to see it, and you expect quality. It's just like a reason to have you stick around. So if you have something about your game, say you're doing an IP for something very important, definitely, or very recognizable, definitely start hinting that you're doing, like say you're doing something for Pokemon, like show a Pokemon, not wait until 2 minutes in, because then you've lost the attention, or the easy attention that you could have got. But the opposite of that is true as well. Don't always, like every time, just start with action or the first 5 seconds. If you know you have a community and people will be watching anyway, you have their attention. For example, League of Legends has quite the community. I would expect that they know that if they show a video or just release it, fans are going to sit down and watch it anyways. So if you know you have a community, or you're going to release it somewhere where people won't be able to run out of the room or scroll past the video, take your time to show it. It's fine. But if it's going to be shown on Instagram for the first time, my recommendation is like visually get their impact. Show like they want to keep attached to that one item on Instagram. And usually blood, heavy impact, or a specific style or storyline, that's kind of what sets the hook. Another tip is get people active. So do something weird that allows them to start a discussion or wondering about the game. So set a hook for a story and leave them wondering about how it continues. So they want to play the game to figure out how it works. So that's kind of the same like with the suspense, like start the action and then leave them wondering about what's going to be next. Don't tell the whole story because you've just watched the trailer for a movie that you never would watch, for example, because now you already know the storyline. And the biggest thing I think I want to tell about this is decide what you want your player or the audience to feel, because they need to see the film, the trailer, and think, okay, this is something that I'm really interested in. So don't go making a trailer that doesn't match whatever your gameplay is going to be in the end, because you're just making a hype for an audience that's not going to play the game in the end. So definitely, if you're going to go crazy, at least make it match the game and the audience that you're going for. But I guess most of the stuff I'm saying makes sense. It's the first thing you probably think about, but I'm saying this because if you just start making game trailer, you forget to think about it. So it's pretty obvious, hopefully. Another recommendation about a game trailer is you need to reach out to media or to whoever you want to pick it up. If you're just going to put it on YouTube, you're not going to get that many views. If you know the right channels, you can send it out. And don't do it when the trailer's done. Prepare yourself. Okay, what media do I want my game trailer to be shown at? Do I want it to be on that website or that website? Collect all the media you want to have attention on, and maybe even a couple of months in advance, start figuring out, like, how do you do that? Do I know people who work there? Do I know who have had their stuff shown there? Ask them, like, how did you do it? Prepare yourself, because that's what helps creating a hype. We did Mac and Cheese. It was 8 years ago, so it's probably not super relevant in the online community nowadays. But we finished the film, and halfway through the project, we decided, okay, if we're going to release this, we wanted to release it big. So what we did halfway, we made a large list of Dutch newspapers, international newspapers, hotspot websites like that we wanted to target if it was released. And by the end of the project, as I often have, is that I thought, well, it's finished, it's probably a fine movie, whatever, we're going to just drop it online. And then someone said, well, that list that we made, we should just maybe look at it again and do it. So we sat down and actually did it. Again, if I did it only at the end and started figuring out what websites I want to post it to, I probably had that feeling. It's like, wow, why would I even bother? It's just this movie that I made. It's just this little thing. It's not that important. But if you just have it prepared, you're forcing yourself to actually use it. Then a bit about making game trailers. It's actually easy if you just plan it in time. It's not going to be a hassle. So we at Colorbleed, we help production partners or game partners to make their game trailer. But I imagine if you're going to do it yourself, make sure you're prepared to do so. If it's a gameplay trailer, of course, collect gameplay footage. but at least if you schedule early, you're gonna know what you're gonna get into. So basically, be the man with the hammer. Unfortunately, this guy has a hammer, but he doesn't have it here in the shot. But be the man with the hammer from the get-go. Be tough on yourself from the beginning, so you actually force yourself to do so. So start thinking about the release. Do I want to release it prior to an upcoming big event? And why do you want to do that? Are you going to be amidst like hundreds of other videos and no one's ever going to see it? Do you have a hook there, like on the event? Are you there? And can you link it to something so that people start linking it together and don't forget about it? So really think about like how people are going to see it and when, and how it's going to influence the reach of the video. Like I said before, how and when are you addressing the media? Start figuring that out. Another thing is if you release very early, say you make an announcement trailer, but your game is finished in 2 years, likely they've quite forgotten about it, unless you have a very tight community from the get-go. So then often what I notice is that a lot of partners that we work with, they have an announcement trailer, often a year or a year and a half in advance. To me, it feels rather early, but it kind of works for them because they build a community on Facebook of people who start following it. They start sharing it to friends. Oh, have you seen this work-in-progress gameplay? So I'm noticing that a lot on indie game developers. So they're building community, and then at the end, when it gets released, they have a more impactful trailer on just action, and showing the game. And regarding the media, if you have a specific game for a specific platform, you can often reach out to something like Sony for PlayStation 4. They might just share it on their channels or stuff like that. Don't be afraid to just ask the big boys. The nice thing about that is if you do so, you're going to get a good bang for your buck. Because if they say yes, you have a huge channel that's going to share it for you. And that's basically what worked for us 8 years ago, but it's still true now. But if you do that, if there's going to be one website that has 1 million followers, you're going to get a lot of views. It's as easy as that. So now you have planned your upcoming release for a game trailer, and you need to plan the trailer production. When do you start planning that? Well, at least long enough in front of the release, because otherwise you don't have the trailer. So what I can recommend then is if you know the release date and you roughly know the length of how long you take to produce a game trailer, just make a back planning. So if it needs to be done on X and it takes me 5 weeks, then it's X minus 5, and that's when I start making my trailer. As it usually goes, it's always longer than you anticipate, especially if it's for yourself and not for a client with a tight deadline. So take a couple of weeks extra. If you work with a partner, for example, like Colorbleed, like us, then just reach out to them. My recommendation is if you know you'll need a trailer at some point, just give us a call. Like ask the people that you might work with, because they might have very different recommendations on timings. For example, if you have the same partner for every trailer and you make tons of games, they might be super busy in a specific period. So if you know in advance, are you available right now? What I've also noticed is sometimes there's this game partner that says, well, I have a game upcoming in a year. I don't have a lot of budget, but say we start trailer development now. Can't you do it in between other jobs? So we can offer a lower budget with the same quality, because whenever we have some downtime, we just work on that. So that's also a helpful tip. Some more information about what entails the game production, what is inside of it and what does it mean. So we do pre-rendered stuff, so the production part is probably going to be mostly about pre-rendered things. If you have a game that sells itself by just gameplay footage, of course you would capture gameplay footage from the engine. But at least, so it's about planning the trailer and the schedule for release, write a story script, a storyboard. If it's just gameplay footage, of course you still need to think what are you actually showing? Is it just going to be clips and clips after each other, or are you going to show that you can level up in the game, that there's a reward system for something, that you can customize this or that. Think about what you're actually showing, because more often than not, it's if you don't draw the attention with the game trailer, you've lost the audience. They might just see the title again, so, I've seen that before, I didn't like it back then, so the game trailer is usually a good start. So yeah, and after all this, of course, don't forget to release the trailer. Again, I've seen it happen, especially on indie developers. But a trailer really is an investment. If it works well, then of course your game is going to sell and it's going to pay itself back. I know that like I started the company Colorbleed Animation Studio about 8 years ago now. And I always had a hard time, like if I had extra costs that I didn't see a direct return of investment, sounds really like a business thing, but if I didn't see like how it would help us along on the short term, then I was like, well, yeah, I don't really have that type of money. But if you want to sustain yourself, you need to start thinking about the long term. So yes, it might mean that you have some more costs up front, but if it helps you in the long run, it helps you survive. So it's really an investment. There's no last-minute discounts on a production like this. It's not like booking plane tickets, where it gets cheaper just before the deadline because they have to book the plane anyway, because it's already flying. The game trailer's not there yet. It has to be produced, whether you do it yourself or someone else. If you do it early, you just have enough time. You can prepare assets as you go along, even if it's just a rough edit at the beginning. If you just have it, you know what you're missing, and you can kind of gather it along production. But if you do it at the end, then you just need to put in the time and force yourself to collect everything, which is more costly, of course. And let's be transparent and talk a bit about money. So I want to show you a trailer that we did for Redeemer. Hopefully the link works.
I always liked monasteries. Monks. People devoted to an ideal. Devoid of compulsion. Devoid of violence. I guess I liked it because I never understood it. They say you can't really change without confronting the past. For some, it takes great effort. For me, it seems I can't avoid it. My past just came kicking in my front door.
So this is a director's cut. It doesn't show any gameplay, but of course, after this, it had gameplay. This was an announcement trailer to get interest about the game. It was a distributor or reseller, I think, that knew how to reach an audience, so they were fine with taking slightly slower pace and stuff like that because they know they would reach an audience anyway. So my first question would be, does anyone have a clue on what something like this would cost? Yeah? 4K. 4K, interesting.
A question from the audience, is every asset in that trailer that you showed made by you or partly by the game company?
So the game itself, it had a temple, but the temple was made on our end. They had a game character. I think it even had a ZBrush design, but it wasn't very cinematic quality. So we upgraded that too. So yeah, basically everything is done. The gameplay, of course, didn't have like a real hair system like this, so we groomed it like that. The beard is tricky, especially together with the clothing. So I hope that answers the question. Everything is made for this.
How many people worked on this?
I think 7 or 8 people worked on this trailer on our side, but it was a pretty condensed production time. I think in the end, it's not really a matter of how many people worked on it, because if you would have less people and you would work longer, it kind of comes down to the same thing. So usually what I do is just look at the film and just like look at this. Say you would have 2 years and there's one guy, or you have 10 days and there's like 100 guys. It comes down to relatively the same thing, unless you do something like a downtime production, and then of course we can take lower rates. But I thought someone said 4K on this side, and that was an interesting thing because for me this would never reach that low.
The idea was from the audience, we don't know how much time this cost, and we're assuming that 4K is one full-time month of work.
Yeah, so basically what's being said is that say you have 4K and you have one specialist guy, he's going to do this in a month. Well, for us, it's not really like that. I think like game development most often too is you have some specialists. There's not going to be one developer. Well, of course there are games that do that, but it's kind of like different types of games. But usually imagine this not AAA, because then I would be like super arrogant. But say this would be focused on those kind of qualities. Then you would have some specialists. So you would have someone doing the grooming and the fur and the the grooming, that's the fur, the cloth, and all effects. You would have someone doing modeling. You would have someone like upgrading the character. So yeah, there's some more specialists. But yeah, usually this kind of stuff is not doable for us, at least for 4K, for 1,000 euros. But on the other hand, if you have gameplay footage and you can cut it yourself and you can make an edit, of course it's very doable. But of course you don't get this type of trailer. So here's a rough schedule that I would probably lay out. So say we have roughly 10 weeks. We deliver on the first day of the 10th week, so about 9 weeks really. And then in the first week, of course, you need to prepare your game assets. We're talking about the film and the game. It's like, so can you give us this and that? But if we condense it, say this is about 10 weeks. So we have the preparation in the first week. We're talking about what you want. We're asking you, like, can you get us game models? Like it might take you 5 months to get all the game models. Then of course let us know up front. But this roughly comes down to it. We're going to do some concepting, and this is a tricky thing because it mentions concepting style, even though you did all the art direction already for your game. But of course, if we're going to go into a different direction with the trailer and the cinematics, we need to figure out like how it's going to differ, and how is it going to be an upgrade very much, or is it going to be very similar, and why, and how would it look similar if it's not real time and stuff like that. So usually we turn one of the models into the new visualized state that we think is going to be good. We have some references, make a mood board. So it's roughly similar to how you'd probably start a game production.
You talked about the rat in this trailer, that it wasn't part of the game, that you made it. Can you elaborate on the rat? Where does that come in on this sheet, and when do you discuss that with the client, and when do you decide to go for it and build it?
Interesting question. So the question of the rats in this movie it's a bit bothersome that you're asking this, because it wasn't really requested by the client. It was an idea that we had, and we thought this is just going to look way cooler with the intro just leading into, and you would like get interest at the very beginning, because first we just had like on top of the rocks, and you would go there, and it would be relatively slow paced, and then you just had something to follow, and it looked, at least for me, pretty badass. So it's a pretty simple answer as to why we want to do it. And it was, I think, pretty late in production. They had a slightly, interestingly enough, they had a tighter scope than this in weeks. But then when we finished it, they didn't release it for 4 months, I think. So we finished it, and it was laying there just waiting to get out. And that's when we said, hey, we do have some more time on our hands, and we are willing to put in our time to make this rat and put it in, because we think it's going to make it much cooler, and they loved it.
It seems like that would be something you'd have to storyboard.
Yeah, usually, well, if the idea is there for the rat in the beginning, we would storyboard it. In this case, we already had like the layout, and we kind of knew that it was going to be a slow intro. We just wanted something to make it more exciting. So what we did is we put like a layout animation kind of in it, like so he's roughly here, roughly there, roughly there. Is it helping the overall visual image of the screen and of the film? And then that's when we decided, okay, this could be interesting to show the client.
Because you already had the temple and the...
Yes,
so it was more about where does the camera go and what does it follow?
Yeah, basically, the exact camera movement was already there. It was intended to go over the floor and towards the character. Yeah. So what was it, 85 to 90K? Interesting. I like that the more I explain, you guys are like, oh, this is going to cost way more because these guys are really good. Thank you. I'm going to show you a budget. So it's 25. And this is, like, if you take these weeks and we can take it relatively slow, this is roughly what you would come down to. Of course, budgets go way up. So 95, I would have done it as well. And go down as well. But this is kind of like, I think, roughly the lower end of what could be interesting to get a trailer out for something like this. The interesting thing about this one is that it doesn't show much. It's basically a guy sitting in a room. And everyone like, oh, this is pretty cool. And that's the interesting thing. If you don't have big AAA budgets, well, this client came to us like, can you do this? And then halfway, well, let me do a step back. So the storyline, I think, behind the game was he was a monk that was fighting criminals for a very long time, I think. And then he stopped doing so because I thought, oh, this is super bad. I shouldn't kill people. So he took a retreat into a monastery because he was super friendly all of a sudden. And that's when he got disturbed by the bad guys again in his monastery. So what they wanted to show is, okay, there's going to be like helicopters, and we see them flying, coming towards us, and they're coming out of the helicopters, and they're going to be super cool guys with guns and stuff like that. So we said, okay, what's your budget? And then we recommended not trying that because it's going to look either super ugly, because we don't have the resources to make it for that budget. So the nice thing about this is we kind of put in the idea of that he's being disturbed. You hear like helicopter sounds. There's like dust from the ceiling. It's very subtle, but it gives the same impact to the audience. So there are ways to help you direct it towards something that might fit your budget. And we do this for game trailers, but like I said at the very beginning, we started out doing commercial work. We're still doing a lot of commercial work. I think it's a little bit over half of what we actually do. So we do a lot of, for Albert Heijn and stuff like Dutch commercials, we do that a lot as well. And usually the first thing I ask the client is like, what is your budget? And what's the scope of what you're looking to receive at the end? So like, what do you want to like have as visuals or deliverables? And what do you think it's roughly going to cost? Because otherwise, what would happen is they would ask me like, I have all these banners and videos and online and offline, and it's going to be on international TV, commercials here and there. And I would just go like, okay, well, that sounds relatively expensive and super big, but it's a very small project. And then if I do this quote to them, and they're getting super scared, and it's often causing issues for them because they just like, oh my God, did I scope this wrong myself? And of course, they think that we're super expensive. But if I just know what they're aiming at, then I can see recommendations and say, okay, this banner, we can combine this two with one animation, and you can cover all of these, stuff like that. So the budget usually helps, even though you might be afraid telling other people.
Which things are, or questions by clients are things that you know are going to be very costly, or wishes that are not going to be costly. And so if you go to you and start talking about the project, and which things make you go, oh, this is going to be very expensive, or and what things are going to be, okay, we can do this for a relatively cheap price.
Interesting, like we have a running joke, kind of when a client requests something crazy, we'd be going, oh, okay, so now they want dragons with explosions and fire and water simulations in between, like everything that's super tricky to do. But usually, I think if you just look at it, like if I would do it, I think most of you guys are game developers and kind of know what goes into making art, I suppose. But say you would do the design for one character, it's usually less work than 20. So you would do animation for one character, it's usually less than 20. Say you would want to show all environments of your game in the trailer, and we need to all redo them, it's going to be more costly than one room where he's sitting. So yeah, of course, like now we're doing a follow-up trailer for a game where they want to show off some of the different weapons also in the cinematic that we're doing, and it's going to be very subtle, but they're all kind of like staff-like weapons. So what we would then do is we would just upgrade one and then match the others, instead of redoing all three because it's just more work. So of course we're going to think clever depending on their budget, like how we would upgrade to their request. But if they just go, here's like 100 weapons, can you all show them in the game trailer? We would probably say, well, are you sure you need that? Because the game trailer is going to be too short to show it anyway.
Do you think you're on the lower end compared to similar companies?
I believe so, yeah. I graduated Edge 8 years ago, and I know I'm not a businessman. So I'm doing a lot of it for just having fun. We love game trailers, I love playing games, so this is kind of the side of things that we do. If it's super commercial and it's something that we enjoy less, we know it's a commercial job and it's just, we need to make money on this. So we kind of like use a different day rate. So yeah, we're being super friendly. Yes. Yeah, I think that answers the questions. Yeah, we just have fun like this. That being said, it's also because we're in the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, the budgets for commercials is slightly different than abroad. They're very cheap. Like we would do a commercial for an agency in London, and they would just have almost 10 times the budget. I've pitched jobs to a company in London that paid more than the full job in the Netherlands. And then we lost the pitch. So it was just here, this is the idea. We spent like 1.5 weeks on it, and then we got paid more than spending 1.5 months for a Dutch commercial. It happens. Of course, not everyone has that kind of money, but yeah, so that's kind of setting the playing ground. Questions so far?
Hi, I'm Miranda from Untitled Games. I create puzzle games for mobile phones, so it's not as dynamic as the images you show now. And what I'm mostly wondering is, how do I make the intro more, or the build-up more dynamic for a gameplay trailer?
How do you make the intro exciting for a puzzle game? It kind of depends on the type of puzzle. Is it a very dynamic puzzle? It's probably easier. Or is it a very slow pace?
Well, actually, mine has an action element in it, so there is some dynamic element that I can use, but it's not like you use a red, for instance, to make that image more capturing in the first 5 seconds. And I'm a bit afraid that if I start with the gameplay directly, that it's sort of, why am I all of a sudden in the game already? Sort of that kind of feel. So how do you prevent yourself from starting with gameplay from the start?
What's the most fun thing about playing your game, and focus on showing that. If it's a very complicated puzzle game, show the puzzling aspect. Don't try and make it a crazy ass fighting thing unless that's the specific thing about your game. And that's kind of what I mentioned, is don't try to sell what you're not making. Try to just explain this is the kind of game, and try to raise the interest among your audience that like a game like that. I must admit it's harder than I thought without actually seeing anything. But I hope this helps.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Hello, Hielke, Dodo Games. Aren't you afraid of misleading the consumer in the end by making a great cinematic trailer that doesn't fit the actual gameplay later on?
I think it's totally fine to show a trailer that is way overhyping the game, as long as you show the audience as well that what the game is about. So I wouldn't recommend showing crazy fighting, even though the game is just like point and click and it's no fighting whatsoever. Probably doesn't help much. So yeah, it's kind of what I said. Like for me, I'm not too much into the game industry. I'm not a hardcore gamer, but I do know some of it. But No Man's Sky, like that stood out to me, is that they were, I think, twittering and like saying things that didn't end up in the game, and writing it is even more clearly put. Like this must be in there because they're saying it. But if you're showing like a title, multiplayer, and there's no multiplayer whatsoever, you're probably doing it wrong. But you can definitely show like multiple characters there, and it's fine if like you show like a co-op player just coming in between, and it's just a very rare element in the game if you're not emphasizing it. So don't try emphasizing things that you're not making, and focus on what you are making.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Nathan from Colorbleed Studios. I'm wondering because, for instance, atmospheric games where there is not a lot of pizzazz and that sort of thing. How would you sort of focus on making that still like visually intriguing?
I would focus on showing the storyline. If it has a catch that people might want to be interested in playing, focus on that, and because the style is probably going to be like inspiring by itself. So definitely try to put more into the trailer that you might not just see by seeing the game off the start. Definitely tell more than what you would just get by seeing the game. And what else would I do? Yeah, I don't know. I think for this I would just first Google competition. Like how did similar games do it, and see either how can I do exactly that but better, or how can I contrast it.
Thanks.
Roy Nieterau from Colorbleed, thank you very much.